Hello and welcome to the second video in our beekeeping webinar series. So this is going to be all about getting started beekeeping. Again, I'm Carolyn Frisbee. I work here at Citrus County Mosquito Control. I'm the public education specialist, and I have been here for almost 5 years, and we've been beekeeping for almost four. We've got a few years of experience under our belts, and we've also participated in the Master Beekeeper program at UF. I got my degree in entomology from UF. I studied bees and mosquitoes. And so this is going to be our beginner beekeeping series part two, and we'll just go ahead and dive right in. So this video, we're going to talk about what we need to get started. So the equipment and your basic must-haves, what few tools you absolutely have to start with. We're going to talk about how to get bees, how to inspect our hives. I'm going to play a video within a video, so we'll see how that goes. If it doesn't work out, I'll link it below and then you can just check it out after this video. We'll talk about the registration process briefly, best practices, and then, of course, list some helpful resources for you at the end. So again, I'm going to say our disclaimer, it's not going to be an exhaustive presentation with everything you could possibly know about getting started beekeeping included within it, but take what you learn here and, continue your training elsewhere. Look up YouTube videos, go to other classes and trainings, and build upon your knowledge that you get here. So to begin beekeeping, you have to have some sort of hive box, right? So today we're going to be talking about Langstroth hives, which are going to be in the next slide. But there's several different types of hive boxes. So there's horizontal hives, there's flow hives. You can run an 8-frame configuration or a 10-frame configuration. There's many different hive boxes that beekeepers use. And, as you grow in your experience level, you might want to experiment with those different types of hive boxes in your apiary. But we're going to be talking about Langstroth hives today, just because that's what we use and that's what most people start out with. So after that, you get your boxes, you need some bees. So that's obviously a must-have for beekeeping is getting some bees, either through the nucleus colonies that we talked about in our last video or from ordering packages of bees. Somehow you've got to get some bees. And then once you have bees, in your hive boxes, you've got to have inspection equipment. So we'll talk about more specifically later what exactly you need to take out with you when you open these hive boxes. There's a lot of equipment out there that you don't really need. They market it to you like you need it. And as a new beekeeper, you're not sure, like I might need this, and it's actually something that you're never going to use. So save yourself some time and money and just get the basics. Personal protective equipment, you definitely need some sort of PPE while you're out working your hives. I've gotten stung multiple times without wearing gloves or my boots or pants, so we'll talk more about that. Later on in the presentation, I'll have some pictures of some suits. Definitely recommend having at least a veil on when you go out and inspect your hives. And then honey harvesting equipment, if that's something that you're interested in doing, you've got to have bottles and extractors and different things to get the honey out of your frames. And there's different ways to do this as well, but I'll just kind of talk about how we did it. And then pesticide treatment and monitoring tools, those are a cost as well that you're going to incur. You've got to make sure you have those things on hand. And then nutritional supplements too. So sugar water, pollen patties, you got to make sure you have those on hand when they're needed. Okay, so here is the Langstroth hive and the different components of it. So this again is a typical hive that you're probably going to start out with. They come in 8 to 10 frame boxes, and we've always used 10, and I've only ever had experience with 10 frame ones. You can get the 8 frame ones. I think they're a little bit harder to start out with just because the bees are going to build out those frames, those boxes faster, and they might want to swarm quicker. So that's, that might be a little bit more complicated when you're first starting out to have to deal with. But they're easy to inspect. They're easy to harvest honey from. You just pull the frames out and it's pretty straightforward, easy, comfortable. They're easy to shop for too. You can get Langstroth hive equipment on Amazon Rural King, you can pretty much go to any big store and find some sort of Langstroth hive equipment there. So when you're in a pinch, if you have this type of hive, you could order something or go to the store and grab something pretty quickly for it. And you can either build your equipment or buy it pre-made. So this will dramatically affect the cost. If you're really handy and you want to build your own frame equipment, or if you want to save some money and you think you can build it yourself, they sell kits. They come unassembled and you just put everything together. I am not handy. I'm not like that. So we did buy all of our equipment assembled. We painted it though. Some boxes we bought pre-painted. Other ones we bought just built but unpainted, and then we just painted them ourselves. And that will affect cost too. If you get them painted as well as built, those are probably going to be your most expensive pieces of equipment because all the work has been done for you, but kind of just determine what's easiest for you and what you're willing to spend money on. But we do recommend painting just for weather protection. So these are wooden boxes, and if they're outside, obviously in the elements, they're going to be affected after a couple years, right? They're going to break down. So we do recommend painting them just to help them last a little bit longer. So over here, we'll go through the Langstroth hive components. So at the very bottom, there's a stand there. Now you don't need this stand, but it looks nice. And if that's something that you want to have because it looks nice, then go ahead and get it. But I don't think it serves any real function. We bought them just because I didn't know that at the time, but they're not necessary. You do need a bottom board though. This is the part of the hive where the bees they have their entrance to the hive and they fly in and out through there. And then on top of that is a deep super. So these are going to be larger frames and they usually contain the brood. So that's where the queen bee is going to be laying all of those eggs and maintaining that brood area. Above that, you can have a queen excluder or you cannot have a queen excluder. Say that 5 times fast. Depends on the year or your beekeeping goals. We typically have a queen excluder on like when we're trying to harvest honey. It just keeps her down in that brood chamber area and she can't get up into the honey supers, which are smaller boxes with smaller frames in them. And the worker bees can get up there and they can, harvest. They can put their nectar and their pollen in there and then turn that nectar into honey, and then all those frames will just be like honey. And then you don't have brood in there or the queen bee, so when you're taking out those honey supers, you don't have to worry about pupa being in your honey. It can get kind of messy, obviously, if that were the case. So excluding her when you're trying to harvest honey, maybe in the spring or summer, can be useful. And then we'll take these queen excluders off in the winter. And let the queen bee just roam the whole hive because we're not going to be harvesting any honey during that time. So we don't have to exclude her. So that's what that's used for. Long story short, it's just to keep the queen down in that brood chamber. And then honey supers are obviously for, that's where we want them to put the honey. That way we can easily harvest it and take it out for us. And then above that would be an inner cover or an outer cover, some sort of covering to go on top of the hive. So moving on to personal protection equipment, you want some sort of bee suit. Now they have jackets, they have veils, they have pants. You could buy all these things separately, or they have like one long conjoined suit where you can get the veil attached to the jacket and the pants. Um, get some version of a suit. If we just have the jacket and the veil suit, and we wear gloves and boots and long pants, and you don't have the full pantsuit though because it's so hot here in Florida. But I do know some beekeepers here that have that. They sell breathable suits. That way they're not so hot, but it can be really, really hot. And I've like gone through heat exhaustion and almost passed out before wearing my jacket and veil. So they can be very, very warm. And if that's something that, affects you very heavily when you're outside, then consider that when you're buying a bee suit, get something that's more ventilated. But like I said earlier, we recommend at least going out with a veil to protect our eyes and our faces. Those are the most important places to protect. And then gloves. Some beekeepers don't like to wear gloves because it's harder to, pull the frames out when you're wearing like thick gloves. But I wear gloves. I don't like getting stung in the hands. So, if you want to wear gloves, I also know people who don't wear gloves. I know people who wear two sets of gloves. So it just depends on your preference. And shoes and socks. This guy here is wearing sandals, so I guess this was not the best picture to use in this presentation. Um, but I mean, it's crazy that you're wearing a whole suit, but you're leaving your little toes exposed. Um, Definitely wear shoes and socks. I've been stung in the ankle area before wearing shoes and socks. So now I wear boots when I go out there, and I tuck my pants and my socks in my boots. So they'll find your feet, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, just make sure whatever you're wearing is comfortable and breathable. And make sure you're hydrated when you're out there too. Like if you know, okay, I'm going to be doing a hive inspection on Friday, try to hydrate Wednesday and Thursday leading up to that hive inspection because you don't want to go out there and be dehydrated in the heat, especially in like July or August. Oh my gosh, you're just sweating in these suits. So just be mindful of that. But you need to wear them because, yes, getting stung is part of being a beekeeper, but you want to, not get swarmed with stings when you go out there. That's no fun. So the inspection equipment that is absolutely necessary. Like I said, there's going to be so many things out there. It's overwhelming. Like when you look at these beekeeping sites and you have no idea what you're looking at, you're like, okay, I think that makes sense. I think I need this. And you just don't know what you're looking at. I remember buying stuff that we did not need and we don't really use very often, but we still have it because we bought it, but we didn't know. So, the things that you absolutely have to have are a smoker and some sort of pellet or pine needles, something to go in it to light, because that is what's going to calm the bees down and mask those alarm pheromones that they put off to each other in the hive when you open it up and go to inspect them. So if you have a smoker handy and you smoke them throughout the inspection, it's going to keep them, calm and not wanting to sting you. So definitely recommend going out with a smoker. Some people will not smoke their hives. I mean, I guess you just have really docile bees, but I'm not going to chance it. I've used the smoker and gotten stung multiple times, so I couldn't imagine not using a smoker, how many stings I would have gotten. So you have to have some sort of smoker, a hive tool. So they have different types. That's what's pictured over here. This is very helpful for getting those frames pulled apart. So in the last presentation, we talked about propolis, how the bees use that glue to seal their hive and stick everything together. They're going to stick those frames together with propolis. And so it's very hard to pull them apart if you don't have some sort of tool to pry them apart. So you need that. And then, of course, your bee suit. So those are your essentials. Those are the things that you absolutely need, and you can 1000% do a great hive inspection with just these materials. Okay, so you need bees, right? So what are you going to do? How are you going to get bees? We talked about packages versus nucleus colonies last time, but if you didn't watch that video yet, and this is the first video you're coming upon, I'll explain it real quick. And so they sell bees two different ways. They sell packages. So these are just a few thousand bees and a queen in a package, in a box. And there's no resources, there's no frames, there's no nothing but bees. So you have to put them in your hive box and they have to build comb and build up their hive, start laying eggs, etc., etc. These can be a little bit cheaper than nucleus colonies for that reason, because they don't come with all those resources. But nucleus colonies, on the other hand, they come with, several frames, usually five. And they come with a drawn out comb on the frames, honey, pollen, nectar, bees, brood, and installing a nucleus colony versus a package can help establish the colony better and help them grow faster because they've already got resources to build upon. They're not starting from scratch like they would be in a package. But both options are available. Determine what fits your beekeeping purposes the best. And there's just some pictures of us doing a colony install. There's plenty of videos out there on this, so feel free to look those up in your own time. We just take the frames from the nucleus colony, take them out, and put them in the middle of our 10 frame hive box, and then the bees have room to expand outward. So some tips when buying bees, we recommend starting with 3 hives. That way you're able to compare and contrast your hives, see which ones are doing better than others. And then if you need resources from one hive, you could stick those in another hive that's maybe not doing so well. So that can be very helpful, especially when you're first starting out. But beware of Facebook scams. There's a lot of fake beekeeping groups out there and fake beekeeping farms. So if somebody's trying super hard to get you to buy their bees and you can't verify that they're a real company, don't buy them because there's so many scams out there. I've heard of people getting, paying for nucleus colonies and then being like, where are my colonies? And they don't exist. So don't waste your money. Those nukes can be upwards of $200. And, especially if you're buying three, you're talking $600. So definitely be aware of those Facebook scams that are out there. And be aware of shipment times too. If you're ordering a package of bees or you're ordering a queen bee, make sure that you're going to be able to pick her up from the post office or make sure that UPS is able to deliver her in a timely manner because if she's sitting in the post office or something over the weekend, she might not survive. And then, do you need a queen? So, most packages and nucleus colonies are going to come with a queen. But if she is not mated or she is not marked, then that's something to think about. Make sure you're searching for mated queens, marked queens if you want one to be marked. Because that, especially mated, that's going to really be a great thing. If she comes as a virgin queen, then she has to go out on a mating flight. And if you're a new beekeeper, you don't know what your drone population is like locally, that can be iffy. You don't know how that's going to work out. So try to get her mated. It's a little bit more expensive, maybe like a couple dollars more expensive, but it's worth it. And then keep breed in mind. So different types of bees are better suited to different purposes. So in the last presentation, we talked about Italian honeybees. They're pretty docile, good honey makers. But there's different types of bees out there too. There's Russian bees. They're a little bit more aggressive, but they make a lot more honey than Italian bees. There's Carniolan bees. There's many different stocks of honeybees. So keep that in mind when you're buying queens, when you're buying bees that you're getting the stock that you want to get. And there's even hygienic stocks out there too that are bred specifically to be more be better at dealing with varroa mites. I couldn't think of the word. But they can withstand varroa mite populations better. So that's something to think about too. Those are more expensive, but if you're really having trouble with varroa mites or you're worried that you will, it might be worth the investment. Okay, so I'm gonna play this video. Hopefully it works. I'm also gonna link it down in the description just in case the quality is not the best. Okay, so it sounds like it's gonna play good, which is great. But this is the UF Honeybee Lab. They have their own YouTube channel. They have a lot of great videos. This is Dr. Jamie Ellis. He's going to talk about how to inspect your hives, and he really just breaks it down. He's very simple, explains things very thoroughly, and so I think this is a great video to learn how to inspect your hives.
In this video, I'm going to talk all about how I work a hive. What I do is I go from the top of the nest to the bottom of the nest, and things that I'm seeing on the way through that I'm actually looking for to ensure that my colony is healthy and productive. But before I do that, I want to point out two things that you should notice while I'm standing by this hive. Number one, I have on a veil. Now, I know that you'll watch.
Actually, I wonder if this is copyright. I wonder if I shouldn't be playing this video and I should just link it. We'll try it. We'll try it and see. We'll just play it and see what happens.
Watch videos of beekeepers all around the world approaching colonies, working colonies without a veil. That can be very dangerous, and I never recommend it. I always tell people when you work a colony, you should at least have a veil on from a personal protective equipment perspective. The second thing I'll do is I will always ensure that I have my hive tool and my smoker handy when I work a hive because, frankly, these are the most essential tools that you need when you're going through a hive. So with a veil, with a hive tool, with a smoker, I can do just about anything with a beehive. So the first thing I'll tell you, now that I've told you all of those pieces, is when I approach a hive, I do not work the hive from the front. When you're out in front, you're blocking all the bees from coming back in to their hive. I don't work the hive from the back because it's awkward to have to pick up frames in this direction. I prefer to work hives standing beside the hive. In this particular case, our arrangement is such as that we have about a 6 or 7 foot beam here that the colonies, two colonies sit on. That leaves us a space between these two colonies where we can put things while we're working hives. So I've got this hive here. The bottom of that hive is about the height of my knee, and it makes it where I'm not bending all the way over to the ground. When I get beside a hive, I typically plant my feet because while I'm working a hive, bees may fall out. I may set a frame down beside me, and I don't want to squash bees. And with all of that in place, it's time to go in. So this particular hive configuration is a deep and a medium, and those two are separated by a queen excluder.
Okay, so I am going to stop it here. I Googled it real quick, and I don't think I'm supposed to be playing this video in a video that I'm planning to upload to YouTube. So check it out. I'm going to link it. It's a really great video. And I play it during all my trainings, but they're not recorded usually. So I usually play the whole thing. But I'm just going to skip forward a little bit. I'll try to explain it. So he opens the boxes, he goes down to the brood chamber, he's got a queen excluder on, so he knows his queen is down there. And this makes it easy too when you're doing a hive inspection because you know, okay, the queen is down here in this box somewhere. So if you're trying to find her, which a lot of new beekeepers like to try to spot her during their hive inspections, you know that she's going to be down there and you don't have to worry about looking for her in that top box. So he uses some smoke, he uses his hive tools, he works them from the side, that way it's easier to maneuver the frames. Um, he likes to take out the second frame versus the first frame. It's a little bit easier for him to do it that way. And he's looking for eggs and larvae. You know, we talked about the life cycle of the bees. If you see eggs in your colony, then that's a great sign that your queen has been there within the last few days. Eggs are a really great sign that she's been there recently. And so you don't have to find her if you find eggs within your hive. But we also talked about how hard eggs are to see. So if you're not good at spotting those, it might make you feel better to find the queen just to double check and make sure that she's there. Okay, and so once he finds eggs and larvae and, you know, he sees a bunch of nectar and pollen in there, he knows they're doing good and he moves on. He doesn't keep looking at this hive because it's not necessary. He sees what he needs to see and he gets in and he gets out. So I'm going to get out of this video and move on. Hopefully that doesn't flag my entire video and I have to re-record. Okay, learning as we go. It's fine. So moving on to nutrition. Um, we talked in the last presentation about how they need nectar and pollen and water and plant resins to complete all of their tasks that they need to complete. So if you are living in an area where there's a nectar dearth or a period where there's nothing blooming and nowhere for the bees to get nectar and pollen from, you do have to go ahead and provide those supplemental resources. So over here on the right, we've got pictured a entrance feeder. So that is sugar water. And I've got a diagram a few slides down of what exactly proportions to use in sugar water. But you feed them and supplement them sugar water because they need that nectar for energy. So they need that to be able to build wax too. So if you're going through a period, you're inspecting your hives and you're not seeing that they have a ton of honey or stored nectar, or even if you want them to build comb, feed them some sugar water. And that'll help stimulate that comb building and hopefully give them enough stores for if they're going through a period where nothing is blooming. And then same over here, this on the left is a pollen patty. So you just lay that right on top of a brood chamber and the bees will eat that within a few days. If they don't, definitely check back and take this out of the hive because if they don't eat it, it'll attract wax moths and then you'll get those wax moth pests in your hive and you don't want those. They're a huge mess. So that happened to us from a pollen patty that we had left in a hive and it was awful. So I don't want you to have to go through that. So definitely beware when using pollen patties. We don't use these as often as sugar water. We supplement sugar water a lot. But we have used them in the past, and that is something that's available to beekeepers. You can buy them, you can make them. I've never made them, so I don't know I can't speak on that. But you can buy them as well. And then another cost that you're going to have to think about is pesticide treatment and monitoring tools. So we talked previously about varroa mite treatments and hive beetle traps, and I linked those in the last video. I'll link them again. But you need some sort of like little mason jar or collection kit to be able to get your sample of bees and alcohol. Or you could do a sugar roll as well. I've never done those before. So I'm not going to speak on what I don't have experience on, but there's videos out there that you can look up sugar shakes for varroa mites as well. So definitely do that. That's a method that you prefer. The bees don't get killed with the sugar roll, but I don't think it's as accurate as an alcohol wash. So it does kill a sample of about 300 bees per hive per month, but it is worth it. Thousands of bees die a day in your hive naturally. So it really is not that many bees in the grand scheme of things when you have a hive full of 50,000 bees. Um, and also they would gladly give their life. They gladly sting you to protect their resources. So I think they would gladly give their life to save the others from varroa mites. But off on a tangent. You can get a Varroa Easy Check. This tool over here is really neat. You can do all sorts of different mite checks using the same tool. We use the alcohol wash method. We fill that with alcohol, ethanol, and it'll kill the bees. And then you can shake it up, and the mites, you look at it from the bottom, and the mites will all fall to the bottom, and then you can count your mites and see what your mite count is. And so that's a really easy way to check them in the field. We used to do it with a small mason jar, and then we would dump them in a honey sieve and run it under tap water, and we would find the amount of mites that were at the bottom of the sieve and count the amount of dead bees at the top and get our mite count per 100 bees. And the Honeybee Health Coalition and the University of Florida, they recommend treatment at 3 mites per 100 bees. So that is why we do these alcohol washes, because if your mites reach that threshold, then you do have to go ahead and do some sort of pesticide treatment to protect your bees. And then in the middle here, we've got beetle traps for the hive beetles. Those are pretty cheap. I think you can get a pack of 20 or 30 for 10 bucks. They're very cheap. They're just plastic. And the apple cider vinegar and the mineral oil that go in the trap. This is apple cider vinegar and this is the mineral oil. this attracts the beetles and then they fall into the mineral oil and die. Those just get bottles of those from Walmart or something, not that expensive, and they last a long time. Because, I mean, you refill them um, every time, but you're only using a little bit of product each time. So it's really, the bottles last you a long time. Okay, so moving on to the registration process. So with being a beekeeper, you do have to register your hives with the Florida Department of Agriculture, and this can be found, I'll link it below. The registration application can be found on fdacs.gov. You just go into the apiary inspection area and you submit and pay your registration fee once you have your hive. So don't do this proactively or preemptively before you have hives. Do this after you have your hive set up. It's like a $10 fee a year. It's pretty cheap. But you do have to do it every year and it does scale up based on how many hives you have. So we only have three, so we only pay like $10 a year. But you need to get to know your apiary inspector and schedule an inspection. So once you have your bees and you register and pay your fees, they will contact you and they will come out, like schedule a time to come out and just look at your beehives and inspect them and make sure that everything is good to go. And then they don't come back regularly, at least ours didn't. They just come out for that initial first inspection once you're registered. But if you have their contact information, they do come out on request. And, if you have problems with diseases or questions, they're a great resource. Your certificate of registration does need renewed yearly. Mark hives. Oh, it's very important that you mark your hives with your registration number. That way, if there's ever any issues, like somebody, stumbling on hives that they don't know whose hives they are, they can look at your registration number and look you up in the beekeeping, in their beekeeping registry and figure out that those are your hives. So along with that beekeeper registration, there's also a beekeeper compliance agreement, and I've linked that here. So if you're watching on a phone, you can't scan that QR code, but if you're watching on a computer, you can. And this QR code will take you to this beekeeper compliance agreement, and that just goes through all of the different rules and guidelines for being a beekeeper in the state of Florida. They have like if you're on this many acres, you can have this many beehives and etc. So that is definitely something you want to check out. Maybe before you get bees and decide where you want to put them, check out this document. And, if you're in a neighborhood, you can, see what the specifications are for, getting bees in your backyard with such amount of property and such amount of fence space and foot from your property line. And yeah, so to figure all that out, definitely check out this document beforehand. And then, once your apiary inspector comes out, they can make sure that you're being compliant. They might say, hey, move them over here, or hey, this might be a better spot. Um, but try to kind of check this out beforehand. That way, once the inspector comes out, you're not having to move your hives or something. Okay, so the cost of beekeeping, I've kind of touched on it throughout the presentation, the different things that we have to buy, but these are like concrete prices. So some of the startup costs are going to be pretty pricey, and a lot of these things are just startup costs. Like the maintenance cost of having the bees is not so bad. But obviously, if you're going to put down rock and buy three hives and buy three sets of bees, like that can add up really, really fast. So that is something to think about is do I have the money to make this investment? Because bees, those nucleus colonies run 175 to even over $200, depending on where you're getting them from and what type of honeybee you're getting. Queens can be $35. We've seen them for $85. It just depends on what type of queen you're getting. And then hive equipment too, you can get it used from other beekeepers, but you don't know what pests and diseases have been in those hives. So be wary of that if you're getting used equipment. Sanitize it really well, or just make sure you know the history of that equipment because you don't know what you could be introducing, what pathogens you could be introducing to your bees. So we recommend buying new, and depending on if you get it assembled or if you get it unassembled, that will affect the cost. But for us, it was around $500 for all of our hive equipment. Training courses too cost money. So this video is free, and there's a lot of other great free resources out there, but like UFB College and the UF Master Beekeeper program, those are all going to cost you some money. You know, sometimes even extension or Parks and Recreation classes will cost some money, like 5, $10. But I mean, the training is worth it, but it is a cost that you're going to have to think about as well. And then maintenance costs can be, not maybe as expensive as startup costs, but maybe more often. You know, you're having to go in and get new queens or get new pesticides, and maybe you're buying these things monthly and you have to fit it into your monthly budget. You have to replace equipment as it goes bad. That's not really a monthly thing, but it could be something yearly that you have to figure into your budget. And then there's also non-monetary costs, right? So your time. A lot of people think they could just get some beehives and put them in their backyard and, let them do their own thing and they'll be fine. But we talked about how they're a livestock. So they're basically your pets and you have to take care of them. And you have to, if you want to harvest from them, you've got to make sure they're doing well. Honeybees that are suffering and dying from disease because you're never checking on them, or they're not going to produce a bunch of honey. They're not going to give you those outputs that you're wanting. So you've got to input your time and effort to get those outputs from them. So that is, if you're trying to just get hives and never take care of them, then that is not going to work out for you. You do have to invest some of your time. And then stings too. So if you're getting started and you're allergic to bees, that might not be the best hobby for you. So that's something to think about too, is how am I going to handle getting stung? Do I have EpiPens? Do I have an allergy? And what if I develop an allergy after I have all these hives? What am I going to do with them? So that's something to think about as well. Okay, and then honey harvesting equipment. That's not cheap. There's tons of different products out there too. And you can certainly get cheaper ones. But depending on how big your operation is and how many frames you want to harvest and what type of harvesting you want to do, it can be kind of expensive. So that's something to think about too. You've got to get things that you've got to take the combs off, the cappings off of the comb to expose that honey. So you need a knife or you need a capping scratcher. You've also got to think about your type of equipment too. So if you have plastic frames, you're not going to be able to really make comb honey. That's going to be really hard. You're going to have to get some sort of extractor, either a hand crank, probably a hand crank. Honestly, if you're a backyard beekeeper, you don't really get into the electric harvesting equipment unless you're like a sideliner or a commercial beekeeper. But if you don't have plastic frames, you have the option of doing cut comb honey. It just depends on what equipment you have and what you're trying to do. But you've got to have frames to harvest, those different tools, a sieve, you've got to have a bucket, you've got to be able to filter these things, right? Funnels, and then of course bottles. So those, you can get on Amazon. And again, these things might be more expensive when you have to purchase them all for the first time. But as the years go on, maybe you just have to buy new bottles and then it's not so expensive. And then, I have this little note down here when we're harvesting honey, you want to wait for frames to be like 90 to 100% capped, because that's going to be the best quality honey. The bees know when it's ripe, the bees cap it when it's ready. So if it's not capped yet, it's not ready. And this is what you want it to look like ideally. And then always leave some for the bees. So this is their food too, right? So they put this away, they store it for themselves to eat. So if you take all their frames of honey, they're not going to have anything to eat and they're going to starve and they're going to die. So I mentioned, before, we took only 4 frames our first time harvesting honey out of one of our hives. So 4 frames out of 10, they had plenty left over to still eat. We probably could have taken more, but we wanted to make sure that we left them plenty the first time we harvested. And then later in subsequent times of harvesting, we did take more. But definitely don't take all 10 frames the first time and not give them anything to eat for the rest of the year because they will starve. And there's the honey that we got. Okay, to wrap it up, now we've got some helpful resources. So, some of the best beekeeping stores that, we shopped at when we were first starting at, I've listed here. So, Data Ant and Sons, that is a beekeeping store in High Springs, Florida. So, I've never been there. I always order online, but they're a great beekeeping supply store. They have a great website. I'll link it below. Man Lake Bee Supply is another good one. They are in Florida. I think they're in Winter Haven because we bought bees from them before. So you can get bees from them, and you can get beekeeping equipment. I think you can also get bees from Dadant. So highly recommend those. Amazon, just be careful, of what sellers you're buying things from. Local bee farms, so just make sure they're legit, make sure they're real companies and not fake Facebook scammers. The extension office. So our local extension office in Citrus County, they have a beekeeping program every year that they do, and we've been involved in that in the past. So check them out. If you're not in Citrus, maybe your local extension office does as well. Facebook groups, there's not just the local beekeeping groups on Facebook, but there's also beekeeping in Florida. There's new beekeeping groups that are just online platforms that you can ask people for advice on online. So those are fun ones to get involved in, ask your questions. The Honeybee Health Coalition is really great. They have great tips for especially pesticide monitoring and pesticide treatment. So I'll link that below as well. And then I always mention UFB College. Here's a picture of the Honeybee Lab because it's just great classes. And I think they offer these twice a year now. It used to just be once a year. They definitely have it twice a year. Maybe they even have it 3 times because they went to 2 different locations last year. So they're expanding it and bringing it to different parts of Florida, which is great. I'll link the Nature Coast and Citrus County Beekeepers group again on Facebook. I'll link the Master Beekeeper program too. Highly recommend getting a mentor because they're really going to help you, especially in your first year. And having someone to go to with all your questions is like so helpful. Oh, and then pictured up here, these are queen cells. So, I don't know why I have a picture of them here. I guess if you're interested in becoming a queen cell producer or a honey producer, that's what I have pictured here is bee ventures. Okay, so this is the Beekeeping for Beginners schedule from last year or this year. They usually have it in the spring, so look out for it coming up this January. I've not heard anything about it yet. I know that Steve, who usually does this at our extension office, is retiring, so I don't know who's going to be taking this over. They might not have one this spring in 2026, but definitely look out for it. It'll be posted on Facebook if it does happen. Okay, and that wraps up this intro to beekeeping, how to get started. PowerPoint, the third and last installment in this series, is going to be all about pests and diseases, what drives colony decline. We'll talk about some of the most common pests and diseases that are out there that you're most likely going to run into. And then some solutions and pest management practices as well. And we'll talk about integrated pest management and how we can use that to our advantage. Because we don't want our hives to look like this, I showed this frame in the last video as well. This is not a good sign. We've got some emergency queen cups here, and we've got some wax moth webbing. So when we see this, we're something's happened here. That's not great. So here are some QR codes again. Again, if you're watching on a phone, I don't think you can scan these. Um, but if you're watching on a computer or an iPad or something else, check out these videos. So Evenings at Whitney, Our Honeybees Really Dying. Dr. Jamie Ellis does a great presentation. All his presentations are great. But he does a great talk about the loss of honeybees versus, beekeepers and how we're replacing them at basically the same level that they're being lost. So honeybees aren't really dying, like the media likes us to think. Also, another great one is Insecticide Toxicity, Bees and Mosquitoes, Real versus Fake Science by Dr. Philip Kaler. He is an emeritus professor from the University of Florida. He actually came to our district a few years ago and gave this talk. We recorded it. He gave us permission to put it on our YouTube. So, hey, you're here watching our YouTube video already anyway. Go back to our channel, check out that video because it is so good. It talks about how the products that we use to kill mosquitoes, their toxicity to bees, and it's amazing the amount, like he just goes into the details of every product and like the minute percentages of how much of each product it would take to kill a bee versus a mosquito. And it's just so it puts things into perspective when you think about mosquito control and you know their effect on pollinators and everything. So it's a really great talk. Highly recommend it. And again, if you have any questions, my name's Terralyn, and here's my email. I'm happy to talk about bees or mosquitoes, or if you had any questions or need any further resources, definitely let me know, and I'm happy to talk anytime. You can also call our office. We can talk on the phone, whatever works for you. And thank you for staying. If you made it to the end, subscribe and check out the first video that we did. And then stay tuned and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the third video about pests and diseases.